Canonically in Bioshock, plasmids caused the downfall of Rapture. But what if they were all you're limited to? Which is why I'm here, to answer the question, can you beat Bioshock with only plasmids? My story begins on a plane, which crashes and sends thousands of dollars worth of 1960s jewellery down into the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. However, the good news is I did manage to swim up and out of the ocean into a lighthouse, expecting to stay out of the water, only to find a bloody bubble which took me back into the bloody death pit I just swam out of. On second thought, the bubble isn't all that bad. After all, I did get to see a movie with a guy called Andrew Ryan, and was talking about how, unlike the popular saying, sharing is in fact not caring. And then afterwards, he inducted me into his underwater city called Rapture. As I entered this mystical city, I saw a man and a woman dancing. Well, I thought they were dancing. And I also thought she didn't like the man that much, so killed him, and wanted me to dance with her instead. Me, of all people. As usual, I was having none of that shit, and just ran off. But not without the radio, of course. And it was on that radio where I found my first best friend in this underwater city by the name of Atlas. And of course, like all best friends, we look out for each other. He says, "I aim to keep you alive." I say nothing because I can't fucking talk. A little ways up the trail, Atlas takes care of my most immediate problem, and it's there I find a wrench and smash through some obstacles. Hang on, isn't this a plasmid only run? Well, yeah, it is. And what I mean by plasmid only run is I can only deal damage to enemies with plasmids. I can't shoot them, I can't whack them with my wrench. What I can whack with my wrench is obstacles and the environment, because they're inanimate objects and they don't exactly pose a threat to me. And another thing to keep in mind, I can also kill enemies with the environment because, well, this is my belief at least, it's not my fault if they walk into a burning couch as they try to chase me. It's their own stupid fault. I soon got my first weapon of mass destruction in the form of Electrobolt. And how did I use this weapon of mass destruction, you might ask? Well, obviously to open a door. After crawling through a plane wreckage, I soon encountered an enemy which would be, let's just say, a bit troublesome. Alright, I'm gonna be totally honest here. I tried everything to deal with this splicer, with only using my Electrobolt. I tried zapping him in water, which apparently is too shallow. I tried dying a whole bunch of times to see if the game would feel sorry for me. Nope, none of that worked. So, I just resorted to whacking him. So yeah, I failed the challenge basically. But that's not gonna stop me from trying to beat the rest of the game with only using plasmids. I got in an elevator and grabbed yet another useless artifact before finally shocking someone in the water, which is all I've ever wanted to do since I've started this playthrough. I found another 2 splicers in the water because they didn't learn from the other guy's mistakes, and ran past every other enemy in this section. I found a little girl doing little girl things, and I saw a big daddy doing big daddy things. After exiting the Footlight Theatre, I ran past some enemies and found 2 more fools standing in a puddle. They got what they deserved. I also used that exact same puddle to shock all of Andrew Ryan's goons. After nearly an entire level of misusing the Electrobolt plasmid, I decided to put it to its proper use, opening doors. Then I was in the medical pavilion. As I entered the pavilion, I had one goal in mind: get the Incinerate plasmid, because that will give me a way to consistently damage enemies without relying on anything. But before enacting this devious scheme to get Incinerate, I hacked a turret, only to deactivate it. I witnessed a gunfight, collected yet another useless artifact, and finally learned how to open a door without the assistance of Electrobolt. When I made it to the pavilion proper, I wasted no time at all getting to the Eternal Flame, where I may or may not have seen a nitro splicer blow themselves up. I mean, I don't blame the poor guy. If I was in his shoes and saw me walking past, I'd probably do the same thing. With that tragic death behind us now, I zapped a camera, and also got the Incinerate plasmid. Yay! Now that I have a way to consistently damage enemies, I immediately got to burning every splicer I found alive. After grabbing a tonic, which means absolutely nothing to me, I made my way to the surgery wing, forgetting completely about the necessity for telekinesis. So my next goal, naturally, was to get telekinesis. But not before burning a few splices. That never gets old. I also shocked a puddle of water, because I felt like it. When I get the telekinesis plasmid, I swap it with incinerate, because just look at it. I caught a grenade and threw it at the rubble, then convinced myself that I was the best thing since sliced bread because I hurled a corpse over a fence. I also used that exact same corpse to get rid of a security bot that was giving me the shits. And I found a combat tonic which I thought long and hard about collecting. Because it's not a plasmid, but it's also pretty close to a plasmid, because it comes in a bottle and it changes your genetic structure. So I was like, you know what, screw it, I'll equip it. A camera spotted me, so out of revenge, I destroyed it. And then I used that destroyed camera to destroy a gun turret. Then I used that destroyed gun turret to kill Dr. Steinman. With old Doc Steinman's keys safely tucked in my pockets, some splicers got jealous because they wanted the keys. So they attacked me, but I was all like, nah, you snooze you lose, so I killed them all. Mr. Bubbles appeared briefly, which startled me. Now I was given the option to either rescue or harvest the little sister. Obviously I rescued the little sister. What do you take me for, a monster? With my newly acquired Atom, I purchased the Enrage Plasmid, as it's the Bioshock 1 equivalent to the Possession Plasmid. Only difference is, people who are under the Enrage Plasmid spell can attack you as well as other splicers. But regardless, it was useful as hell. I destroyed a turret with armor-piercing rounds, not in the way you might expect, and destroyed the second turret with a concrete slab. Now it's time for the Bouncer Big Daddy fight. I'm gonna be honest here, I didn't find it that hard. Then again, telekinesis is overpowered and I was playing on easy, so that might have played something. So I really breezed through it. Until this stupid bloody splicer come along, trying to ruin my day, then vanished just as quick as he arrived. Then a second splicer come along, but this time I actually dealt with him, because, you know, he was quite annoying. And then finally, I defeated the Big Daddy with a corpse. I rescued this little sister as well, mainly because I felt sorry for her because I killed Mr. Bubbles. On my way back to the emergency exit, I ran past some enemies, then I caught a grenade and threw it at a nitro splicer. Then I put the key into the lever, apparently. Then I was on my way to Neptune's Bounty. As soon as I entered Neptune's Bounty, I decided to tango with a Rosy Big Daddy. Now, one thing to keep in mind, a Rosy Big Daddy is slightly more dangerous than the Bouncer in the previous mission. Why, you might ask? Well, the Rosy has a rivet gun, so he's dangerous from afar, and he can also throw proximity grenades in your direction, which can either explode instantly, or they can be used as mines. Much like the Bouncer Big Daddy boss fight in the previous mission, I didn't have too hard a time dealing with the Rosy. And also, quite similar to the previous Big Daddy boss fight, I also defeated him with a corpse. After dealing with this little sister, Tenenbaum rewarded me with a hypnotized Big Daddy plasmid and some Atom. With this newly acquired wealth of Atom, I purchased a health upgrade, a target dummy plasmid, and 2 plasmid slots. I destroyed a rocket turret and made my way to Fontaine Fishery's door, where I was greeted by a fella named Peach Wilkins, who basically told me to get a research camera so I can research some spider splicers so they can be slightly more easily dealt with. Not that they're a challenge anyway, I absolutely shat on this one. I zapped some splicers that were in a puddle and rewired the internal plumbing in a vending machine. Doing this gave me a discount on all items, to which I abused it, purchasing every EVE hypo that I could. I came across a group of enemies and thought, this would be a perfect time to use the Enrage Plasmid, so that's exactly what I did. So, I used it, and waited behind a wall, and waited, until there was one left, to which I burned it. I also burned a Big Daddy for the first time, and once again, rescued the little sister. Also, I'm not going to talk about every Big Daddy fight, because that'll get boring. Just know, I rescued every little sister in the game. I also got the research camera, and it was at this point exactly where I debated whether to use it or not. I eventually opted to use it because 1, you can't progress the story without it, and 2, you're not damaging any enemies, you're just learning their weaknesses, so to speak. After taking my first picture of a spider splicer, I got the security bullseye plasmid, which is very useful. More useful than I found the Enrage plasmid, so I swapped it out. And basically what it does is, it essentially acts as if the cameras and turrets and security bots are hacked. So, it's a bit of an advantage considering I set the challenge for myself that I can't hack those things. After taking all necessary pictures of the spider splicers, I fought a Big Daddy with a Big Daddy's corpse. Then, I made my way back to the Gatherer's Gardens, where I found it somehow even easier than before to kill the spider splicer. I also bought the Winter Blast Plasmid, which is kinda like Electrobolt. Only thing is, it doesn't zap enemies, it freezes them, which is kinda handy. I knock on Peach Wilkins' door for the second time, and then he finally lets me in. He takes my weapons away, and leaves me with only my plasmids. Oh no, what will I do? I swap Winter Blast and Telekinesis with Enrage and Target Dummy respectively, then I go in all guns blazing, plasmids blazing, into Fontaine Fisheries. To deal with the majority of the enemies, I used Enrage and Security Bullseye, because there's a camera there and there's also a turret there. So, those two plasmids come in very useful, and I used Target Dummy to distract every other enemy. To finish off the rest, I used Incinerate. I swapped Enrage back over to Winter Blast and Security Bullseye with Telekinesis, and I made absolutely certain that I didn't come into contact with the Pneumo with my weapons in it. Then I was out of Neptune's bounty and into the Smuggler's Hideout. First thing I did in Smuggler's Hideout is get on the beers. Then I met Atlas's family, then Andrew Ryan locked me in a cage, after which I dealt with some splicers. And then after that, I watched Atlas's family blow to smithereens. I entered Arcadia and saw a ghost. Then I incinerated some splicers and froze a turret for the first time, believe it or not, and I found that to be utterly useless because I couldn't hack the damn thing. So I destroyed it. I set fire to yet another splicer, but the dumbass runs into a Rosy Big Daddy. And of course, the Rosy Big Daddy somehow knew it was me that set fire to the splicer, all of a sudden comes charging at me with his rivet gun. So I was left no choice. And another splicer kept doing these weird dance moves which I can only describe as abstract. After rescuing this little sister, Tenenbaum gave me another 200 Atom, which I used to purchase a Plasmid slot, a Physical Tonic slot, the Eve Saver Tonic, the Armored Shell Tonic, an upgraded version of the Electrobolt Plasmid, and the Cyclone Trap Plasmid. I pulled the ultimate Return to Sender on a splicer, then zapped a camera. I pulled yet another Return to Sender, then I entered Julie Langford's office. She said I needed to get a sample of Rosa Gallica. When I was finished talking to Julie, I sprung a few splicers into the air, and because I thought that was so fun, I trotted on a Big Daddy, completely disregarding the fact that a Big Daddy is obviously much heavier than a splicer. So, I just left him alone. Not for very long though, and to be frankly honest, this is the easiest Big Daddy fight I've had so far. I finessed through the tripwires, for the most part, and got the Rosa Gallica sample. I made it back to Julie, and I gave the sample to her. Then she died. Now, I'm just stuck here, with Julie and the Rosa Gallica sample. I don't really know what to do with either of them. That is, until I found a safe, telling me exactly what to do with it. The Rosa Gallica, that is. I still to this day haven't quite figured out what I meant to do with Julie. The audio log also tells me I need to get 3 other ingredients, those being chlorophyll solution, the B enzyme, and distilled water, which is all found in the farmer's market. After launching some splicer into the roof at Mach 12, I thought it was a good idea to change the difficulty from easy to medium. I'm sure that won't bite me on the arse later on. I took out a splicer who was obviously allergic to pumpkins, and gave a power to the people station a piece of my mind. I killed a Houdini splicer so I could get the chlorophyll solution trapped within its corpse. And because I don't feel like talking about all 7 times I had to kill a Houdini splicer for this same reason, here's a montage. Once I entered the farmer's market, a turret blew itself up. I had nothing to do with it, I swear. A camera followed in the footsteps of the first turret, and a second turret died, once again due to mysterious circumstances. After this, I got my first upgraded tonic, Eve Link 2. What Eve Link does is, well, every time you use a first aid kit, you get just a touch of Eve. What is Eve? Well, if you don't know what Eve is right about now, you are fucking stupid, but then again it could be my fault because I'm horrible at explaining things. Eve is the substance used to cast plasmids. With my difficulty increased, I decided to challenge myself by taking on yet another Big Daddy. Oh my god, this was hard. I started off with nearly full health and 7 first aid kits, all the way down to barely any health and 1 first aid kit. But regardless of that, I did defeat the Big Daddy and rescue the little sister, and I stocked up on first aid kits until my pants sagged. I made my way to the Whirly Winery to find 7 bottles of distilled water. And to this day, I once again still wonder how they get distilled water in a city that's at the bottom of the ocean. Actually, then again, they probably just capture the water, boil it, filter it, then, do whatever. Jeez, I look dumb now. Anywho, on this noble quest, I found Pac-Man, and also died for the first time by accident. But you should all know I'm not one who is set back by minor obstacles such as death itself. So, I went back to the Whirly Winery to find the few remaining bottles I've yet to kidnap. After collecting the necessary amounts of water, I made my way to the bee enclosure, and it was here where I found the insect swarm plasmid, which will be infinitely useful later on. I also bought the 6th and final plasmid slot. I also collected the 7 bee enzyme samples. Now, I had everything that was necessary to make the Lazarus Vector. So I went to a UN vent and crafted it. And it was here where I found out, despite you can make ammo, you cannot craft any plasmids, which is a whole load of BS if you ask me. With the Lazarus Vector tucked deep within my pockets, right next to Doc's Diamond's key, I made my way back to Arcadia, where I learned that Andrew Ryan isn't too fond of the idea of saving the trees. I saved Julie Langford's body from a potential necrophile, and plugged the Lazarus Vector into that great big whirly machine thing, whatever you call it. And then, after several delays and several unnecessary Big Daddy fights, I saved Rapture. I saved Arcadia. I saved the world, unfortunately. Now, after saving the world, I went to Fort Frolic. After watching my only hope of escape sink down into the water below me, I took out some spider splicers in a fit of anger because, felt like burning some things. After burning all the spider splicers, I had a thought. I just realised that I haven't used the camera since Port Neptune. So came my rampage of taking photos of every single thing that moved in a 5-foot radius. But that's later on in Fort Frolic, so I don't need to know about it just yet. I bought some first aid kits and ran up the stairs to be greeted by a security camera. So I used the decoy plasmid on it to attract both the camera's security bots and some splicers which I didn't even know about. And afterwards, I just hopped in the elevator as if nothing ever happened. On the top floor, I watched Kyle Fitzpatrick die, and that was kind of hilarious. So I took a picture of it because, a picture lasts longer. But Sander was like, nah mate, it's mine. I'm like, sure, whatever, bruh. I spent some time admiring the stage and wander all across the stadium, seeing where people would have sat and all that sort of stuff. And I jumped from balcony to balcony, and Sander was like, great job, bruh, you should play for you should do high jump. And I'm like, oh yeah, I should. Then he sent some Houdini splicers after me, because that wasn't very nice. I kindly disposed of them and went to the atrium and stuck the photo in his portrait of death. I did get a prize for putting the photo in the portrait. A crossbow. Yeah, pretty useless, I know, but it's the thought that counts. I left the crossbow right where it was, and made my way to Poseidon Plaza, to fulfill my lifelong dream of becoming an ice sculpture. But I was quite disappointed to know that the ice melted, so I used Incinerate on a whole bunch of gas canisters, and they blew up. I don't know what I was expecting, but it certainly wasn't that. Realising that one of Sander Cohen's friends was inbound, I was thrilled to know that I could finally have a reason, or an excuse, to take another photo of a dead person and stick it up on his wall. After taking the photo of Martin Finnegan, I soon realised something. I was out of Eve and out of money, and I'll soon be out of options. That is until I realised dying restores your Eve. So I could sort of cheese the game. After exiting that winter wonderland, I soon entered the plaza proper, which is when I truly let my inner photographer shine. But before I got too carried away taking photos of dead people, I took my chances with a Bouncer Big Daddy. Not just any Bouncer Big Daddy I have, It was an elite. And this single fight alone took me about half an hour, because 1, I was out of Eve, and 2, I came up with the strategy of just dying over and over again, which, although did work, was incredibly tedious. This Spider Splicer died surprisingly easily. Then I hacked a vending machine and bought as many Eve Hypers as I could. Then I became the Exterminator, killing every Spider Splicer that I could. After this massacre, I found a new strategy to kill some Big Daddies. What I did was I used the turrets outside of Eve's garden, and more or less wanted the turrets to shoot me, and just put the Big Daddy in the road. If that makes sense. I mean, you can see it on here, of course it makes sense. Finishing off this Big Daddy was the hardest part though. Even though it has a quarter of its health taken out, it was still took me like, what, 10 minutes to just defeat. Although it did have a glorious ragdoll effect at the end. Then I upgraded my health, Eve, and Incinerate. Then I proceeded to fight fire with fire, using one of the Big Daddy corpses to take out another Big Daddy. Later on, I decided to buy the Machine Buster tonic, because I made a sort of agreement with myself to not hack anything that can deal damage. I then stocked up on medkits and Eve Hypos. And it was about here when I started taking photography seriously. I took my first picture of a bouncer, and got my first gift for taking more than a reasonable amount of photos of spider splicers. I watched a painting explode, then I laughed at some spider splicers because they were on fire. Then I killed and took a photo of yet another one of Sandy Cohen's friends. I stuck him on the wall, then I laughed once again as I continued to burn some more spider splicers. I felt bad for laughing at another spider splicer's misfortune, so to relieve myself, I went to the strip club, and oh my god, I kid you not, there was a ghost dancing on the pole. So naturally I followed it. The ghost led me to a woman who must have been into some freaky stuff. Then on my way out, I met this alcoholic who was throwing beer bottles at me. That dumbass. I threw him right back at him, and he didn't quite like that. And also turns out it was another one of Sandy Cohen's friends. So I more than happily photographed the body. I took some more pictures of spider splicers, and put the final photograph on Sander's wall. He was happy, and it was all like, here, have this prize, now get out. I did as I was told, and made my way to Hephaestus. Okay, now here's one thing to keep in mind for Hephaestus. This is sort of like the transition between easy pea shooter game to holy Jesus Christ, these enemies are ruthless and they will kill me in one shot. So what this means is the enemies get much harder from seemingly nowhere. I killed a splicer with a shotgun for the first time. Then I entered a room which is full of what I can only describe as abstract art. I set cyclone traps in the doorway of the room and took my first ever picture of a leadhead splicer and a Houdini splicer. Actually, I took so many photos of enemies that the game decided to give me a prize, which, let's be honest, the Scrounger tonic is kinda useless. And I also got rewarded for taking a photo of a little girl of all things. I also took advantage of a splicer's borderline immortality for my amusement. But then I got surprised by these hooligans who tried to kill me of all things. So naturally my first instinct was to take a photo. In fact, my photo was so good that the game decided to give me another tonic, this time much more useful. I spent every ounce of Eve and every bit of health I had on this Big Daddy fight, only for it to go down in vain. After this tragic loss, I ignored every Big Daddy and went straight to the workshops, where I found an EMP bomb. However, like with everything you get contractors to do, it's half finished. So, they left it up to me to finish it. The good news is, they didn't leave me too much to do. All I had to do was get the nitroglycerin, a half can of ionic gel, and 4 R34 wires. Only problem is, where you get the R34 wires is from Big Daddy corpses. So along came my siege of pure hatred and what have you against the Big Daddies that have wronged me in the past. I got another gift from Tannenbaum and bought an upgrade to my health, my Eve, an upgraded version of that vending tonic that gives you better prices, and the final upgrade for Electrobolt. Once I put the components on the EMP bomb, I poured lava into some water. Then, I placed the bomb on this great big pedestal thing and watched it blow up. The security had a go at me, but you know, I just ignored them. That's how I deal with all my problems. And finally made it to Andrew Ryan's office. I stocked up on Eve Hypos and saw a poster that is definitely not a spoiler. talked to Andrew Ryan for a bit, killed him because I was sick of him. Now, although I did kill him with a golf club, that doesn't count, the game forced me to do it. And it turns out my best friend Atlas isn't Atlas at all. It's Frank Fontaine. After this revelation, I fell through a hole in the floor, but lucky me landed in a hospital bed. In the hospital, I saw Tenenbaum face to face, kind of, and used a wheel to open a door. But something strange happened. My max health decreased. But Tenenbaum said, nah, it's all good mate, it's just a part of the plan. You just have to go and find, some medicine that cures it. I fought an elite Rosie for the first time, which I will say was going well, until it grew a brain. And all I wanted to do was change the difficulty, but I made an agreement with myself that I couldn't. So I was kind of stuck, dying over and over and over again, to kill it. And actually that's the only strategy I used to kill a Big Daddy from now on, because it was the only one that worked. After rescuing this little sister, Tenenbaum gave me an armoured shell tonic and some Adam, which I used to buy another health and navy upgrade and the final upgrade for Incinerate, which will be infinitely useful considering that's my main plasmid. I found a tonic which has something to do with inventing, right next to an audio recording of Dr. Suchong telling me where that medicine is to help my heart beat normally again. He says I need to go to Tenenbaum's apartment. On the way there, I find another audio recording of the paparazzi saying that Fontaine's house code is some number that I forget now. But it turns out the medicine is not in fact in Tenenbaum's apartment, but rather Fontaine's penthouse. Hey, lucky I got the paparazzi's audio recording of what his penthouse number is. I get the upgraded version of Electric Flesh, but more importantly I get the medicine. But no one told me I needed 2 doses, because now the side effect is my plasmids are randomised. Geez, lucky me. So much for plasmid only run. But I manage, I'm tough, I'm resilient, nothing can stop me from beating the game with only plasmids except that one thing earlier, but we won't talk about that, will we? When the game decided to give me Winter Blast, I used it to my advantage, freezing a security bot. Only thing is, I was stuck in the elevator, but so was I. I lowered the elevator, but it wanted to go down before me. I was stuck in midair for God knows how long, until I decided to solve the problem, if you know what I mean. Second time around, old Robocop's still stuck in the elevator, but this time, instead of using Winter Blast on it, I zap it and hack it. And then I deactivate it because I don't want to fail the challenge based off a technicality. I stock up on Eve Hypos and waste no time getting to Apollo Square. Then when I get to Apollo Square, I waste no time getting to the Artemis Suite. And it's there where I use the bees to deal with the enemies and get the second dosage of Lot 192. I say g'day to Dr. Suchong, who's looking better than ever. Now my plasmids are back to normal, which I take advantage of right away. After dying more than once, I head back to Olympus Heights to deal with that last little sister that's been on my mind. With this newfound Adam, I purchase the final upgrade for Insect Swarm. And I proceed to spend the next 6 years hacking this one health station, only for me to give up in the end. I go back to Apollo Square and go on a rampage, killing anything that walks or looks at me funny. Now, unfortunately, the rest of the Apollo Square footage has been corrupted. But don't worry, you're not missing out on much. All you're missing out on is basically the very start of Point Prometheus, and that's about it really. In Point Prometheus, I am to fulfill my second lifelong desire, that of becoming a Big Daddy. Firstly, I obtain the boots, so that now sneaking up on enemies will become ineffective. Like, listen to those great big hoofers.
Via these boots here, there should be
I tried dialing 000 in Rapture, but then I realised Rapture isn't in Australia. Then I played Ring Around a Rosie with a security bot. Then I put my mouth around this great big spinny thing. Then I get the bodysuit, which gives me another 25% damage resistance. I give a Big Daddy an ultimate April Fool's prank. Then I get the helmet. Righto, so I'm just going to speed through this bit because I don't want to look through this visor more than I have to. I collect the 3 pheromone samples, then Tenenbaum says that I'm ready to get a little sister. So I knock on the vent and lo and behold one comes out. So she says, look after the little sister as she goes through the proving grounds. Like I'm gonna take Tenenbaum seriously. Nerd. Anyway, yes, that first little sister did die. But that's okay, I got a second one. And as we know, children are replaceable. I fight the last Big Daddy that I will ever fight in this game. All the while, Frank Fontaine is telling me that he's so spliced up, he's like the Hulk or whatever he said. I stock up on Eve and first aid kits, then get the little sister's atom harvesting tool to use against Frank Fontaine. I rearrange my plasmids and tonics to what you can see on screen now. Then, I confront the big fella. Now, anyone who has finished Bioshock knows how piss weak the Fontaine boss fight is, but I did have a slightly better time than usual with only plasmids. I think it's just because, you know, he's slightly more immune to plasmids, and you can't really use Incinerate on him while he's fiery, or electric bolt on him while he's electric or whatever. So I did kind of like that aspect to it, but it was still the Fontaine boss fight, and it's still pretty shit, and all you need to do is just throw a whole bunch of explosive barrels at him. And when he isn't in his fire mode, all you have to do is just incinerate him a whole bunch of times. And yeah, that's really how you deal with him with only plasmids. And yeah, that's it. I kill him, and I do not successfully beat Bioshock with only plasmids. Right, I'd like to take these final 10-15 seconds to say thank you so much for making that Bioshock Infinite with Only Vigors video get to 2,000 views. That's insane. I only got like 60 subs, but 2,000 views. Thank you.